petroleum and related products, as well as communication equipment, increased by 14.4% and 10.7% year-on-year, or 5.4 percentage points and 1.4 percentage points faster than the same period last year. In September, the total retail sales of consumer goods grew by 9.2% year-on-year, 0.2 percentage point faster than August. In the first 3 quarters, the national per capita consumption expenditure of residents was 14,281 yuan, a nominal year-on-year growth of 8.5%, 1 percentage point faster than the same period last year, or real growth of 6.3% after price adjustment, 0.4 percentage point faster. The nominal growth of per capita consumption expenditure of urban households increased by 6.5%, 0.3 percentage point faster than the same period last year. The nominal growth of per capita consumption expenditure of rural households increased by 12%, 3.4 percentage points faster. For investment in fixed assets grew mildly in a more steady way, and private investment and manufacturing investment accelerated. In the first 3 quarters, the investment in fixed assets, excluding rural households, was 48,344.2 billion yuan, up by 5.4% year-on-year, 0.6 percentage point less than the first 6 months, and 0.1 percentage point faster than the first 8 months. Private investment reached 30,166.4 billion yuan, up by 8.7% year-on-year, 0.3 percentage point faster than the first half of 2018, or 2.7 percentage point faster than the same period last year. Investment in primary industry was up by 11.7%, secondary industry grew by 5.2%, and tertiary industry went up by 5.3%. In the first 3 quarters, the total investment in real estate development was 8,866.5 billion yuan, year-on-year growth of 9.9%. The floor space of commercial buildings sold reached 1,193.13 million square meters, year-on-year increase of 2.9%. Total sales of commercial buildings were 10,413.2 billion yuan, a growth of 13.3% year-on-year. Fifth, the growth of exports speeded up with substantial increase in import. The consumer price grew mildly. The growth of prices for industry products were stable. The surveyed employment rate dropped and employment situation was generally stable. In September, the surveyed employment rate in urban areas was 4.9%, 0.1 percentage point less than last month. The urban surveyed unemployment rate in 31 major cities was 4.7%, 0.2 percentage point less than last month, and 0.1 percentage point less than the same month last year. The surveyed unemployment rate of major labor force, meaning people aged from 25 to 59, was 4.3%, which was the same as last month. By the end of the third quarter, the number of rural migrant workers reached 181.35 million, 1.66 million more than the same period last year, an increase of 0.9% year-on-year. The average monthly income of rural migrant workers was 3,710 yuan, up by 7.3% year-on-year. Eighth, the resident income grew in tandem with the national economy, and the income gap between urban and rural residents narrowed. In the first 3 quarters, national per capita disposable income was 21,035 yuan, a nominal increase of 8.8% year-on-year, or real growth of 6.6% after price adjustment. The growth rate was the same as the first half, which is almost the same that of national economy. In terms of permanent residence, the per capita disposable income of urban households was 29,599 yuan, a nominal increase of 7.9% year-on-year, or real increase of 5.7% after price adjustment. The per capita disposable income of rural households was 10,645 yuan, a nominal increase of 8.9%. The urban per capita income to rural per capita income ratio was 2.78. 0.03 less than the same period last year. The median of the national per capita disposable income was 18,236 yuan, a nominal increase of 8.7% year-on-year. Ninth, economic structure continued to improve and the economy was more consumption-based. Industries continued to be upgraded. In the first 3 quarters, the growth rate of the value added of the tertiary industry was 1.9 percentage points higher than that of the secondary industry, accounting for 53.1% of the GDP, which was 0.3 percentage point higher than the same period last year, and 12.7 percentage points higher than that of the secondary industry. The role of consumption as the basic economic function was further solidified. In the first 3 quarters, the contribution rate of final consumption expenditure to the economic growth was 78%, 46.2 percentage points higher than the total capital formation. The consumption expenditure on services continued to represent a large share. In the third quarter, the consumption expenditure on services accounted for 52.6% of the national consumption expenditure of households. The investment structure continued to improve. In the first 3 quarters, the investment in high-tech manufacturing industry grew by 14.9% year-on-year and 9.5 percentage points higher than the total investment. The trade structure was further improved. In the first 3 quarters, import and export of general trade increased by 13.5%, accounted for 58.4% of the total value of the imports and exports, an increase of 1.9 percentage points compared with the same period last year. The export of mechanical and electronic products grew by 7.8%, accounting for 58.3% of the total value of exports. Hence, the supply structural reform continued to deliver results, and the growth of new driving forces accelerated. Capacity utilization rate maintained stable. In the first 3 quarters, the industrial capacity utilization rate nationwide was 76.6%, maintaining the same level as compared with the same period last year. In the third quarter, capacity utilization rate of smelting and pressing of ferrous metals, as well as mining and washing of coals, were 78.7% and 70.1% respectively, or 2.0 and 1.1 percentage points higher than the same period last year. Corporate cost and leverage ratio decreased in the first 8 months. The cost for per 100 yuan turnover of principal business of large industrial enterprises was 84.39 yuan, 0.35 yuan less than the same period last year. By the end of August, the asset liability ratio of the industrial enterprises above the designated size was 56.6%, 0.5 percentage point lower than the same period last year. The inventory of commercial buildings continued to decrease. In the first 3 quarters, the investment in the management of ecological protection and treatment of environment pollution and the investment in agriculture increased by 33.7% and 12.4% year-on-year respectively. New industries grew fast. In the first 3 quarters, the value added of high-tech industries and equipment manufacturing increased by 11.8% and 8.6% year-on-year, 5.4 and 2.2 percentage points faster than that of the industrial enterprises above the in designated size. The value added of industrial, strategic, and emerging industries went up by 8.8% year-on-year, 2.4 percentage points faster than that of the large industrial enterprises. New products grew rapidly. Production of new energy vehicles was up by 54.8% year-on-year, and integrated circuits up by 11.7%. New types of business were booming. In the first 3 quarters, online retail sales reached 6,278.5 billion yuan, a year-on-year growth of 27%. Online retail sales of physical goods were 4,793.8 billion yuan, a year-on-year growth of 27.7%, accounting for 17.5% of the total retail sales of consumer goods. Online retail sales of non-physical goods grew by 24.8%. Generally speaking, national economy was running within reasonable range in the first 3 quarters. The economy continued to stay stable with a good momentum. Economic structure improved. Development quality and efficiency also improved. The opening up was carried forward and people's living standards was raised. However, we must be fully aware of the challenges from outside and increasing. Structural adjustment will continue to bring pains, and there are uncertainties behind a stable economy that is also growing more slowly and under greater downward pressure. Going forward, we will follow the strong leadership of CPC's Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at the core and the guidance of Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. implement the requirement of high-quality development, continue to defend reforms and opening up, prioritize improving weak areas as the key task of supply-side structure reform, increase effective demand, focus on stability in areas like employment, financial sector, foreign trade, foreign investment, domestic investment, and market expectation. Speed up efforts to ensure a steady and healthy development of the economy and accomplish the major targets for economic and social development in 2018. Thank you. Now the floor is open to questions.
Thank you. I'm from CCTV. My question is, according to the statistics you shared, on GDP and industrial growth, there has been some slowing down. Does it mean that there are still many difficulties in facing with the economy? And how do you see the economic prospects? According to the information that I shared in the first 3 quarters, let me wrap it up with 3 sentences. First, the landscape of stability has not changed. On growth, in the first 3 quarters, the growth rate was 6.7%, which is a strong foundation for the around 6.5% yearly growth. On employment, in September, the urban surveyed unemployment rate was 4.9%, which was 0.1 percentage points lower than last month and last year. In the first 3 quarters, newly added jobs was over 11 million, which has already hit the annual target 1 quarter in advance. On prices, in the first 3 quarters, CPI was 2.1% higher, 0.1 percentage point higher than last year. But if that is deducted from energy and food, the core CPI was 2.0%, which is the same as last year. On income, in the first 3 quarters, average disposable income was 6.6% higher, the same as last year, which is also in sync with GDP growth. So according to all those indicators, the economic performance is still within the proper range. Second, there is stronger momentum for progress. The economic structure is better, and according to the statistics on industrial structure, the services are playing a greater role as the ballast. In the first 3 quarters, value added of the tertiary industry was 7.7%, and contribution was 60.8%, 1.8 percentage points higher than last year. In the first 3 quarters, on the GDP structure, the tertiary industry account for 53.1%, which is 0.3 percentage points higher than last year. On the structure of needs within the industry, it is becoming closer to the higher end. In the first 3 quarters this year, consumption's contribution to economic growth is 78%, 4 percentage points higher than last year. And investment is also taking on a better structure. In the first 6 months, investment has been growing, and private investment has been growing at over 8%, which is a relatively high speed. The quality of the economy and efficiency is also rising. Thirdly, new driving forces are expanding very fast. In the first 3 quarters, steady progress has been made in structural reform, and the mass entrepreneurship and innovation program is being upgraded, and there are a growing number of market entities. In the first 3 quarters, there are over 5 million newly registered market entities or 18,000 every day. Among large industrial companies, high-tech equipment manufacturing, strategic emerging industries have 11.8, 8.6, and 8.8% growth rates respectively. And on new consumption forms, online sales has been growing at 27.7%, which is a continued high speed of growth. Therefore, the new growth drivers have contributed greatly to the upgraded economic structure and continued economic growth. In summary, the economic performance is in a proper range, and we are ensuring stability while pursuing progress. At the same time, we have also seen that the external environment for our development has taken on great changes, and there is some moderation in the economic growth. In the next step, in accordance with the policies put forward by the central leadership, we will continue to ensure the sound and steady growth of the economy. Thank you. With Phoenix TV. In the third quarter, the growth was 6.5%, which is a record low for 9 months. Will the growth be still lower in Q4? As you said, there is mounting downward pressure. How serious will the downward pressure be? Thank you for your question. From the information that I shared in the first 3 quarters on growth, on employment, and on prices, on income, as well as balance of payment, the economy is maintaining stability and progress. At the same time, we can see that there are changes in the stable performance, and the stability lies in the external environment of our economy. For example, in the first 3 quarters, the global economy is losing steam, and world trade is expanding at lower speed. And there are also many other difficulties. Turbulence has been taking place in the international financial markets. China is the second largest economy in the world. It is facing more uncertainties, and plus there are uncertainties from the China-US trade. So we do face some downward pressure. All those external factors will create uncertainties for China's steady economic performance. But at the same time, we need to be clear that there are many certainties for our economy. For example, China's economy enjoys a high level of resilience. We have good fundamentals. These are all certainties. And secondly, we will continue to deepen reform and high-level opening up, and the dividends of reform will continue to unleash. This is another certainty. Plus, all regions and departments in China will continue to enforce the policies to ensure stability. So, despite the downward pressure and uncertainties, we have the certainties domestically to offset those external factors to ensure the steady performance of our economy.
Economic Daily. I've noticed that in the first 3 quarters, the total social retail sales grew by 9.3%. There is a significant difference from the same growth rate of last year. There is a lot of discussion about downgrade consumption. What is your view? Thank you for your question. If we look at consumption from a monthly perspective, we often look at the total retail sales of consumer goods. There were fluctuations in this figure in the previous months, and there are a lot of discussions. We can look at this issue through many angles. If we look at the total figure, the total retail sales of consumer goods in the first 9 months was up by 9.3%. That is the same rate as the first 8 months. And that is 0.2 percentage point higher than the first 7 months. And we can also look at this issue from the surveyed average consumption. The average personal consumption was up by 8.5%, 1.8 percentage points higher than the first half of this year. So we can look at this issue from a more comprehensive angle. Like I mentioned, the contribution of consumption to GDP growth was 78%, up by 14 percentage points from the first half. So this increasing trend is not changing. And we can also look at the angle in coefficient. The consumption to goods like alcohol and tobacco. The angle coefficient has decreased to 29.3%. And in this year, in the first 3 quarters, this figure was 28.5%, down by 0.7% from the same period of last year. And the consumption, residential consumption to in personal consumption, services consumption has accounted for 48.2%. That is significantly higher than the figure in 2012. If we look at physical goods consumption, such as goods for upgrading consumption, there is a rapid growth, like cosmetics and smart housing appliances. There is a rapid growth. Automobiles, there is the growth is slowing down, but the share of SUV sales is increasing rapidly. And we also look at the urban-rural consumption structure. In the first 3 quarters, consumption of rural residents grew by 12%. That is significantly higher than that of urban consumption. There is also a high growth rate in consumption for entertainment and cultural events. So I don't think the trend of upgrading consumption is changing. The expansion in consumption and the higher share of consumption, higher contribution of consumption to GDP growth is continuing. We have taken into account the transformation in our economic development model. At the same time, we have to be aware that there are many factors affecting consumption. We need to work even harder to increase people's personal income, to create a solid foundation for higher consumption, and we need to deepen supply-side structure reform to meet the needs for upgrading consumption. Thank you. Next question. First, Caijing. My question regards investment. In the first 3 quarters, the investment in many areas continued to drop, particularly in infrastructure investment. How do you view this low investment in infrastructure? Will it be a new normal? And about private investment, this year there is a huge issue with private financing. Will this investment affect private financing? So I understand that you have 2 questions about infrastructure investment in the first 3 quarters. The in the first 3 quarters, the investment in fixed assets growth rate was higher, was 0.1 percentage point than the first 8 months. And the private infrastructure investment is only 3.3%, continue to drop. Now we have to look at the monthly statistics. The slowdown is narrowing. With more infrastructure projects implemented and more policies introduced, this investment in infrastructure will continue to stabilize. And about private investment growth, it is fair to say that the situation is fairly good since the beginning of this year, and the growth rate is around 8%. Private investment mainly comes from real estate investment and manufacturing investment. So in these two areas, more than 70% come from private investment. And the real estate investment has maintained the rate of around 10%. So in this context, the private investment has maintained rapid growth. Next question.
With international marketplace news of the United States, some believe that there will be more downward pressure on the Chinese economy because of China-US trade war and other factors which will lead to slower investment and employment. So how do you see the economic prospects of next year? Thank you. Judging from the first 3 quarters, the Chinese economic performance is pretty steady, but at the same time, we need to see the external changes and uncertainties. In particular, there has been major changes in the external economic environment, and plus there is the uncertainties of the China-US trade frictions, which could have an impact on our economy. But from the first 3 quarters, including on employment, the surveyed unemployment rate, and the newly added jobs, they are all in a very stable shape. Also in some coastal areas and export-reliant companies, we have made some investigations. These companies still have very stable employment. But amid such stability, there is some structural challenges. So we still need to continue to monitor the external impact on employment. On investment, the trend is still very stable. In the first 3 quarters, from inward investment flow, there is a relatively fast growth. China has a large market, which is also growing rapidly. It has strong attraction for investment. On trade, previously the customs have briefed the numbers of China's trade. The growth has been better than expectation, especially in Q3. In the 3 months of Q3, judging from the volume and the speed of trade, there has been a monthly growth. And there are multiple factors. First, there are the initiative of companies who have been adjusting their operation. And second, we have a series of foreign trade policies, including trade facilitation policies, which have been taking effect. Our businesses are also diversifying their operation. Our trade with emerging markets and Belt and Road countries outpace the overall trade growth. So this is the basic information about exports and imports. For next year, we are about to achieve the around 6.5% growth target for this year, and for next year, we have some external uncertainties, but still we have our own certainties and resilience, which we believe will be effectively offsetting the external pressure. As long as we focus on managing our own affairs well, we are capable of maintaining stable performance for next year as well. Thank you. With China National Radio, head of the PBOC recently said that China is considering treating state-owned enterprises with a competition-neutral policy. Does it mean that there will be a fair competition among all enterprises? How do you understand the competition-neutral policy? What changes will take place in terms of China's policy tools? Thank you. This is a pretty professional question. For competition-neutral policy, academically speaking, in market economies, for all sorts of businesses, they are treated as equal. This is the principle of competition neutral. That means all market entities are seen as equals in terms of market access and access to resources. With such a principle in place, it will facilitate the development of private economy and private investment. It will also be conducive to reforming state-owned enterprises. Thank you.
I'm from Reuters. Based on the figures you released, the trade consumption contribution to GDP growth is in a negative field. Does that mean that trade tensions has had an impact on our GDP growth? And how do you see the trade tensions effect on financial market? Will there be implementations in an international sense? You have two questions. Like I mentioned, in the first 3 quarters, the 3 needs contribution to GDP growth included 78% from consumption and imports and exports. Its net export contribution to GDP is now in a negative field. Does that mean that in the context of U.S.-China trade frictions, export has become a negative factor for China's economy? I don't think so. Like I mentioned, in the first 3 quarters, there was a rapid growth of exports and imports, particularly in the 3rd quarter. And we saw a monthly increase in the 3 months of the quarter 3. But why this figure is in the negative field? I think there are many the following reasons. First, in an accounting perspective, it does not only include trading goods. We have to take also into account trading services. Now, trading goods, we have a surplus, but we have a trade deficit in trade-in services. We have to take that into account. And according to accounting principles, we have to adjust trading goods according to some international principles. For example, import, we have the prices onshore, and for export, we have the prices offshore. And third, when we evaluate the growth rate in export, we have to also take into account the factor different prices. we have to have price-adjusted figures. So the final figure is used for our final accounting. Use a constant price figure. Another factor is also very important. We have to look at the growth rate. Not only look at the growth rate, but also the base point, the base figure. Because now we have a large base figure. And with all those factors taken into account, that net export contribution to GDP is now in the negative field. But I think I want to say that the effect from the trade tensions is not on the surface. Also, there are other factors like the interest rate hike in the United States and appreciation of the U.S. dollar. There is, in some developing countries, depreciation of currencies is very serious. And now the exchange rate between RMB and US dollar is relatively stable. Now China's economy is basically stable, and some momentum will be sustained. So from this perspective, with stable imports and export and good balance of international payment, I think this momentum will be sustained. Any more questions? No questions? Okay, that concludes our press conference. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mao.